Today I'm going to tell you about my most recent research on anomalous perception and its association with individual differences in visual imagery. But before I go into that, let's take a step back because most people, even vision scientists, don't realize how different the mind's eye can be for different people. So I'm going to start you off with a demonstration to get you thinking about your own imagery abilities. So please pause this video and take a moment to close your eyes and imagine a ball rolling off of a table as vividly as you can. Once you've done this, press play on the video again. Now, a test about your imagery. What color was the ball? What was the ball made of? And which direction did it roll off the table? And importantly, did you answer these questions based on what you visualized in your mind's eye, or did you think of the answers only after you saw the questions? About 90% of people will have seen some variation of a ball rolling off of a table. For some, it might be pretty faint and basic. Maybe they had trouble seeing the ball in motion. For others, they might have seen a red rubber ball rolling off to the right of the table, on their kitchen table, for example. But it's estimated that about 5% of people will have seen something extremely vivid and rich, with added features like the ball is moving in slow motion and splashing into a puddle as it rolls off the back of a table. And about 5% of people, no matter how hard they try, only see the inside of their eyelids. They're perfectly capable of hypothetically thinking about a ball and could come up with reasonable features for the ball after the fact. But in the moment they are asked to evoke a visual image, there is nothing. We've known for a while that there are variations in imagery vividness, but research on imagery extremes is only in its infancy, with aphantasia or a blind mind's eye at one end and hyperphantasia or a super mind's eye at the other end. These extremes are important to investigate because recent research has already found that there may be lots of cognitive and perceptual differences between people with aphantasia and imagery, especially very vivid imagery. And therefore, imagery extremes offer us an opportunity to investigate influences of our inner reality and external reality on each other. For the current study, we asked how different imagery abilities impact perception, our hypothesis being that people with stronger or more vivid imagery will have a stronger reliance on imagery for perception, which will make them more prone to anomalous perception, such as pareidolia, or seeing something meaningful in random patterns, such as seeing dinosaurs in the clouds, or synesthesia, which is the spontaneous fusion of two typically unrelated experiences, such as seeing colors while listening to different musical tones. And perhaps even pseudo-hallucinations, which are the topic of today's talk, and the paper on this research is currently under review as an exploratory report. So actual hallucinations are spontaneous and unpredictable, but there are actually a few reliable methods to induce visual pseudo-hallucinations. One way is through sensory deprivation, which includes complete blindfolding, often for several continuous days. This method can take up to 24 hours for visuals to emerge. However, and you can imagine that it would be extremely expensive to do this under experimental circumstances. Another method is uniform Ganzfeld, which is uniform luminance across the visual field, such as staring into a clear blue sky. In case you don't speak German, Ganzfeld actually means whole field. So this can induce visual experiences within a few minutes, perhaps 10 to 15 minutes in some cases. However, a flickering Ganzfeld was found by this researcher and others to be the quickest and most effective method of inducing pseudo-hallucinations. Flickering Ganzfeld, or Ganzflicker, is just the alternation of two uniform Ganzfeld displays at a certain frequency. Several frequencies seem to work, but we chose 15 Hz based on the cited study here, which reported between 15 and 16 Hz red and black flicker as the most conducive to eliciting images, and these can emerge within a few seconds. So we chose flickering Ganzfeld, or Ganzflicker, as our method of choice to induce quick and reliable pseudo-hallucinations. We created a short task where people were asked to view Ganzflicker for 10 minutes and fill out a questionnaire afterwards about their experiences. We first recruited among people with aphantasia on the website Reddit, and we also posted on the hyperphantasia subreddit, but got fewer responses. So to get a group of people with imagery to compare against our people with aphantasia, we recruited from the psychology student population. We asked participants to report whether they saw anything at all in the Ganzflicker, and if they did, to make various discrete choices about the vividness, complexity, frequency, emergence time, and duration of visual experiences. Furthermore, participants were asked to describe as much as they could remember about what they saw in the Ganzflicker, which proved to be perhaps the strangest and most interesting thing about the experiment, but we couldn't quantify these reports for the current study. Some of the experiences were extremely immersive and were similar to psychedelic experiences. Someone reported feeling like they were moving through a medieval castle, for example, as you can see here. And others reported fractals, lasers, various geometric shapes, and illusory colors, among other things. And several people also felt changes to their state of consciousness, such as feeling their body was suspended in space, like they were in a trance, or like they could reach through the screen to get to another place. Of course, others reported that they didn't see anything and felt no change, and they got bored. So it was apparent that there was a whole range of experiences that people were having, and we wanted to see if the inability or ability to activate visual imagery was connected to any of this. So on to the results. We first analyzed the distribution of imagery vividness ratings that we obtained. We got a bimodal distribution, with one distribution skewed towards 0, complete aphantasia, which was expected having recruited from the aphantasia subreddit. And the other distribution is a typical imagery distribution that we obtained from a mix of Redditors and students. We then conducted a Bayesian contingency tables test and found extremely strong evidence that people with imagery are more likely to experience pseudo-hallucinations compared to people with aphantasia, generally. In this graph, we show imagery vividness ratings on the x-axis and number of people on the left y-axis. Gray parts of the bars indicate the proportion of people who reported seeing no pseudo-hallucinations in the whole experiment, whereas salmon-colored parts show the proportion of people who saw something more than just the red and black flicker, including illusory colors, geometric patterns, and the things that I described before. Blue dots represent individual data points, with dots above the bars showing the number of people who saw pseudo-hallucinations. And the dotted line is the boundary between the aphantasia and imagery distribution. You can see that there is much more gray among the aphantasia distribution, indicating more individuals who did not see anything in the Ganzflicker. The right y-axis shows the probability of seeing pseudo-hallucinations, and you can see from the blue logistic regression line that the probability is about 60% among aphantasics, but it goes up to 90% among people with imagery. We then conducted a Bayesian Mann-Whitney U-test and found extremely strong evidence that people with imagery experience more vivid pseudo-hallucinations compared to people with aphantasia. In this figure, imagery vividness is again on the x-axis, with individual data points on each line indicating the person's discrete vividness report, from weak or insubstantial to very vivid, almost real. Points are jittered slightly for visibility, and green dots belong to the aphantasia distribution and gray dots belong to the imagery distribution. The semi-transparent blue circles denote confidence intervals for the likely shapes and centers of the two distributions using a Gaussian mixture model. You can see that for pseudo-hallucination vividness, the center of the aphantasia distribution hovers between weak or insubstantial and clear but not vivid, whereas the center of the imagery distribution hovers around clear but not vivid and clear, moderately vivid. The next effect we found in another Bayesian Mann-Whitney U-test was extremely strong evidence that people with imagery see more complex pseudo-hallucinations in the Ganzflicker compared to people with aphantasia. Again, imagery vividness rating is on the x-axis, and discrete complexity rating is on the y-axis, from formless colors, most simple, to complex objects and scenes, which are the most complex. Here, the center of the aphantasia distribution is concentrated around simple patterns and colors, whereas the center of the imagery distribution includes complex objects. There was no evidence for a difference between imagery groups in terms of temporal features of pseudo-hallucinations, including emergence time, frequency, and the duration of individual experiences. For both the aphantasia and imagery distributions, Pseudo-hallucinations tended to emerge within a few seconds. The center of the aphantasia distribution also included reports of pseudo-hallucinations taking sometimes 1 to 2 minutes to emerge. For frequency, the center of both distributions included reports of seeing frequent pseudo-hallucinations, and for duration, both distributions centered around reports of a single pseudo-hallucination lasting 1 to 2 seconds or persisting for several seconds at a time. The preliminary results of this first exploratory study suggest that compared to people with aphantasia, people with imagery are more likely to see pseudo-hallucinations, especially those that are vivid and complex. As I mentioned previously, the manuscript is currently under review, but I encourage you to check out the preprint in the meantime on SciArchive to get more details and analyses than what's presented here. You can also view the data and code on the connected OSF project. Finally, if you're interested in getting involved in extreme imagery research, or you think you might have extreme imagery yourself, please don't hesitate to contact me. If you're interested to try out the Ganzflicker or some of my other experiments, you can visit my website, ReshanneReader.com, and I have 4 demos currently running. Finally, I would like to thank my co-authors, Varg Königsmark and Johanna Bergman, and also you for your attention.